What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 11 fantasy wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in, and if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, and also give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. Shoot us your questions there as well. We will do our best to answer them. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get access to exclusive content. All those details in the description. But for now, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdowns, I want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. And I specifically want to highlight their matchup shop function, which is an absolute blast. In fact, we've been using it since the start of the NFL season because, let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B can get a little bit stale, a little bit boring. Well, that's not even close to being the case with the matchup shop of Overlay Fantasy, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups, and it's super simple. Just pick whichever player you think will have the higher fantasy performance. And just like a regular bet would work, check out the spreads, do your research, and then win some money. You can bet on pretty much any single sport that you want, whether it's NFL, golf, MLB, etc. All those options are there. And again, super simple. Pretty much for any single NFL game coming up, you've got a bunch of different matchups that are always updated and added to. So if it's something as simple as just putting a single submission, you can do that. But guess what? If you want to get a parlay going and double up some of those winnings, you can do that as well. So take advantage of this. All of that homework you're doing for your fantasy lineups, let's have that translate to some big time winnings for your wallet as well. So do yourself a favor and check out Overlay Fantasy's matchup shop now. Our first matchup of the week features the Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday night. And as far as wide receivers are concerned, I think this one will be a gold mine. For the Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins is a must start every single week, as if what he did last week versus the Buffalo Bills with that Hail Mary as time was expiring wasn't proof enough. He's a must start, period. Christian Kirk, though, even though he was a bit of a dud last week, which we warned you, with Kirk, it's a bit of a boom or bust situation. He gets a good matchup here versus this atrocious Seattle Seahawks secondary. So I actually like him as a decent wide receiver 2 on the week. And in a game that should be relatively high scoring, featuring the aerial attack, kind of like the first matchup, I like both these Cardinal wide receivers. And honestly, same goes for the Seattle Seahawks. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Look, Metcalf won't draw Jalen Ramsey every single week, so expect a bounce back performance here, and I would say in a big way. I like both of these wide receivers. I think both have wide receiver 1 upside on the week, so I would be firing everyone in this matchup with confidence. Then we go to the Titans at the Ravens, and not the best matchup in terms of wide receivers. For Tennessee, A.J. Brown. I mean, if you're desperate, you could consider Corey Davis, but this Baltimore Ravens secondary, it's a good unit. And for that reason, I wouldn't test it out too much. I continue to say that for the Tennessee Titans, it's going to be a situation when they face these tough defenses where you're only going to get one kind of relevant wide receiver on the team, and I continue to say that will be A.J. Brown, because you know that Derrick Henry will also get his, and that's kind of what we're predicting here versus the Ravens. And then for the Baltimore side, I'm going with Willie Snead, a bit of a sleeper, but you see it with Baltimore. Marquise Brown is just too much of a liability. Again, a similar boom or bust type of player that's too dependent on the deep ball, which just hasn't been there for Lamar Jackson. The accuracy has been an issue, so Willie Snead kind of maybe a safer play that could get a little bit of increased volume, and the matchup here isn't awful. So for that reason, Snead is the guy that I would take a chance on. I would say high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2, and then the remainder guys here, Corey Davis, Marquise Brown, both sits in our eyes. Moving on, we got the Eagles at the Browns. For Philadelphia, Jalen Reagor is the only wide receiver I'm interested in starting, and boy, how things change after all of a sudden the Philadelphia Eagles start to get some weapons back, because just like that, Travis Fulgham maybe just disappears back into obscurity in the blink of an eye, because boy, it really is concerning what the amount of targets going his way looked like last week. Now, versus the Cleveland Browns, I don't expect that to all of a sudden flip in his favor. And the Eagles are only going to get healthier at that position. So for that reason, Reagor seemed like the guy that was being targeted the most. I think that will continue to be the case. So I would rather start him. I think he is in the low-end wide receiver 2 category. For Cleveland, Jarvis Landry, only one wide receiver here. And look, maybe getting stats from last week's performance, probably you don't want to do that when it comes to the Cleveland Browns because that was a very bad weather game. So it was going to be a run-oriented type of scheme. And honestly, that's going to be the case for the Cleveland Browns pretty much going forward. That's why you'll probably only get one viable wide receiver in terms of fantasy purposes from their offense. I believe that is Jarvis Landry. For that reason, you see Rashard Higgins here as a sit. And then same situation with the Eagles. You see Travis Fulgham, you see Greg Ward. They're going to get healthier. Miles Sanders, like we said, also obviously has returned. He's going to factor as a bigger piece in this offense. So things are kind of trending in that direction. So Fulgham and Ward sits for us. Then Lions at the Panthers. And assuming Kenny Golladay doesn't play, then you're starting Marvin Jones. Obviously, if Golladay suits up, then you put Golladay in as a starter as well. If that's the case, I think Marvin Jones becomes more so of a risky low-end wide receiver 2 and primarily in standard formats. But for the Panthers, I actually really like this matchup for them. Now, the status of Teddy Bridgewater a bit up in the air, but he is tentatively expected to play. So Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel is someone that I'm interested in starting. The reason I also throw Curtis Samuel in there is, one, obviously this is a great defensive matchup, but also if Mike Davis is limited, we already expect Christian McCaffrey to sit. Curtis Samuel should also get some opportunities as a rusher, which will up his value. So I'm interested in all these guys. Obviously, Anderson and Moore are the guys that I would prefer in the mid wide receiver 2 category. And then Curtis Samuel may be a bit of a dark horse, but he definitely has the upside. And then for the Lions, I'm sitting Marvin Hall. Yes, he had some success, but make no mistake about it. This game, even if Kenny Golladay is back, will feature the rushers for the Detroit Lions. I expect a big game for DeAndre Swift. So I'm not all that in terms of all these different wide receivers for the Detroit Lions. Moving on, we got the Patriots at the Texans. Keeping this one simple, Jacoby Myers for the New England Patriots. With Julian Edelman out, he has been the lone bright spot for New England. He's been the guy that's been the most consistent target for Cam Newton. I anticipate that will continue to be the case. And I really like this matchup actually for New England here versus this suspect Texans defense. Now, Damiere Byrd, if you really are desperate, potentially you can throw into that starting mix. But I think outside of Myers, it's tough to trust then when you throw in James White as a pass-catching running back, and then how much Cam Newton likes to rush the football. That's why I see Byrd more of a risk and why I'd rather sit him. But for the Texans, obviously assuming we don't have the same weather conditions like we did versus the Browns, Fuller and Brendan Cooks are starts, and I think both these guys will have a bounce-back game. Fuller, a wide receiver 1, Brendan Cooks, a mid-level wide receiver 2. Afterwards, Steelers at the Jaguars, and honestly, I'm starting all the Steeler wide receivers here. This is a great matchup for them. Yes, there's a bit of a danger in terms of the game script going run heavy, but Deontay Johnson, as long as he's healthy, he is honestly the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Then Juju Smith-Schuster, he's been getting the targets. And Claypool, he is consistently being used. He's one of these rookies that the Steelers have faith in. And again, great matchup for them. I think this will be a high-scoring affair from the side of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm starting all these guys. And for the Jaguars, I'm honestly sitting all the wide receivers. I don't have faith in this matchup. I think it's an awful one, a rookie quarterback versus this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I'm going to go ahead and sit Shark, Keelan Cole, and Chris Conley. I do think if you want to take a shot on one, it would be DJ Shark because he's, the guy that, in my opinion, has the highest upside. But again, I don't see even high-end wide receiver 2 upside production from any one of these guys for the Jaguars. Afterwards, Bengals at Washington. I'll start Tyler Boyd and I'll start T. Higgins. And we've probably gotten to the point where we can officially say T. Higgins has overtaken A.J. Green as that wide receiver 2 for the Bengals. And that's why you see A.J. Green as a sit. While for Washington, this has been the case for a while. Terry McLaurin is the must-start guy here, a wide receiver 1. And I love the matchup here. So to me, he is the no-brainer. He's the highest upside wide receiver out of all these guys in this matchup. And like I said before, sit A.J. Green, just that third option. Tough defense as well. Then for Washington, yes, they had a high scoring affair and Alex Smith aired it out well, and guys like Steven Sims, maybe Cam Sims even, had a lot of targets. I don't think that'll be the case here. Again, I'm not banking on that every single week. I'd rather start my guys that I'm the most confident in. That is Terry McLaurin, and then, you know, guys like McKissick, guys like Gibson. So for that reason, the other remaining Washington wide receivers are sits. Next, Falcons at the Saints. Pretty simple here. Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones are must starts, obviously assuming Calvin Ridley shoots up, but we anticipate that will be the case. Then for the Saints, this gets a little bit interesting. No Drew Brees for a while, so it'll be probably Jameis Winston under center, and we'll see what that means, but Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, we're still starting them. This Falcons defense is a friendly matchup. You know, maybe for the time being, it will be a focus on the rushing attack for New Orleans, but Jameis Winston, we know from his time in Tampa Bay, he's not afraid to air it out. So I think there will be plenty of opportunities for these guys. I'm starting both of them. Michael Thomas could potentially have that kind of big breakout game after he's had a couple of weeks to return from his injury. This is a great matchup. So I like Michael Thomas still as a wide receiver 1. Emmanuel Sanders as a high upside wide receiver 2. Afterwards, Dolphins at the Broncos. Devontae Parker is someone that I'd like to start. He's been getting the most amount of targets, especially with Preston Williams out. And then Jakeem Grant, a potential dark horse candidate, is, you know, probably a low-end wide receiver 2. Then for Denver, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick. I believe that's the pecking order in this offense. A lot of it will depend on the health of Drew Lock. If that's the case and he doesn't suit up, then probably only Jerry Jeudy, I would say, especially versus this underrated Dolphins defense. And for that reason, we are sitting KJ Hamler, who, in our opinion, again, is the third man. So he's the odd man out. Afterwards, Jets at Chargers. I'll start Jamison Crowder. I'll start Brashad Perriman. These guys will get the volume, and I anticipate the Chargers will score a lot of points here, so the Jets will have to turn to throwing the football. We don't expect Sam Darnold to play, but either way, Joe Flacco can still distribute the football to these guys. And for the Chargers, I actually love Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Yes, they had kind of disappointing weeks, and if you take away the garbage time touchdown for Keenan Allen, even more so. But versus this Jets defense, I really like both these guys. Allen should be a wide receiver 1. Mike Williams has some high upside as a high-end wide receiver 2 in standard formats. Then for the Jets, I'm sitting Denzel Mims with Crowder and Perriman, presumably healthy. I think Mims just won't get enough volume. And then we go to the Packers at the Colts. I'll start Devontae Adams. That's pretty much a no-brainer. He is a top 3 wide receiver every single week. For the Colts, Michael Pittman Jr., he's the guy that's, looking like the most reliable wide receiver for Indianapolis at this point in time. But honestly, there's obviously bigger names here like a T.Y. Hilton, but in my eyes, the Colts will probably focus on the rushing attack here versus this suspect Packers rush defense. So if there's any wide receiver for the Colts I'd take a chance on, it's Pittman. And, if you start throwing another name or a third name, I would say that's a little bit too risky. For that reason, Hilton and Pascal are sits, and same for Allen Lazard and MVS. Yes, MVS has had some success, but it's been way too big play dependent. Colts have got a solid defense, so I don't think they will let up those type of mistakes. I'm sitting these guys here. Afterwards, Cowboys at the Vikings. This one's tough for the Cowboys because essentially, what are we going to get from the quarterback position? I do believe that we might see Andy Dalton back in the lineup. Last time that was the case, Michael Gallup was getting a lot of targets. That's why we're, saying, okay, maybe Michael Gallup, a decent flyer. But I think either way, you have to look at it with the Cowboys. These guys, all their wide receivers are in the wide receiver 2 category. Yes, this is a good matchup. That's why we feel confident in starting at least 2 of them. While for the Vikings, Thielen and Justin Jefferson, I think, are smash plays. Both have wide receiver 1 upside on the week. And then CeeDee Lamb right now, just kind of the odd man out. I think this is a situation where Lamb could potentially be a start, but it will, again, depend on the health of Andy Dalton and who shoots up for the Cowboys at quarterback. Then Chiefs at Raiders. I'll start Tyreek Hill. I'll start Mecole Hardman. I think this will be a high-scoring affair, and I like the upside of Hill. Obviously, he's been very consistent, but Mecole Hardman as that kind of boom or bust type of standard low-end wide receiver 2. Then for the Raiders, Henry Ruggs and Nelson Aguilar. Usually, we don't take a chance on 2 Raider wide receivers, but this is a game where I anticipate the Chiefs will put up a lot of points. And in the first matchup, the Raiders obviously had a lot of scoring success and even beat the Chiefs. But I think the tables will probably be a little bit flipped here. They might be down. So Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar, guys that have the, long ball touchdown upside are the ones I would be focusing on here, which means Hunter Renfrow is a sit in our eyes. Then Rams at Bucks. I'll start Robert Woods and I'll start Cooper Kupp. They're both solid, reliable wide receiver 2s, and I think that'll be the case versus the Bucks, who are a defense that more so specializes against the rush. So I like the upside here. Then for Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, they're just getting a little bit more usage than someone like an Antonio Brown, who, I do like in particular matchups. Here, honestly, the biggest question will be who is Jalen Ramsey lining up against right now? Probably a little bit too early to tell, but as that news comes out, and, it's available to us, I would probably say whoever Ramsey lines up against is the guy out of the Tampa Bay trio that I am sitting. We saw what Ramsey just did versus DK Metcalf. He's done it before, so for that reason, I anticipate Godwin, Evans as starts. I like the upside for Evans. I think Godwin's a little bit safer. And then, obviously, Brown a sit. Josh Reynolds, a little bit too risky. Yes, he just did have a lot of success, but this Buccaneers defense is tougher than that of Seattle, so Reynolds is a sit. So with that, we wrap up this Week 11 Fantasy Wide Receiver Start and Sit breakdown. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other start or sit questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them. And if you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us, sending us your questions there. We answer all of those. And lastly, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for a free newsletter to get access to exclusive content. All those details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.